Hey everybody, Roar the Lions UK, Matt and Ash and Eric just about to come in as well. Hope you're all well. If you've got questions for Eric, if you've got questions for us, get them in the chat now. Don't forget to @Roar the Lions so that we can see it. Hello Eric.
Guys, how's it going?
Not too bad, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm all right. A little busy this time of year,
Yeah.
I appreciate you accommodating me.
No. I mean, your a familial birthday is an important thing, so.
Yeah, the little ones, well, middle, I guess, is 9. So she's got a whole big shindig at a whole other place. It's just it's going to be an adventure.
Hey to everyone in the chat. Kurt Steele says, "Nice flag, Eric." So.
Oh, nice.
It's legit. I like it.
Thanks. I want to retweet the stream Twitch. Let me find.
I think I should have tweeted it out about 10 minutes ago or so.
Yeah. Do you have one? Do you have one up like on your feed? I see just this one.
I don't think so. No, but I should have just tweeted @ing you with the link in it. So
I'm more than happy to retweet that if you want to do that. Or if you want to do that, I'll retweet that out now, and we'll.
Yeah. So I tweeted.
I'm sure we can get some people.
I added you say 10 minutes ago with that link. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
misunderstanding.
Sorry.
There it is. All right, got it.
Cool. You obviously have done so many pods recently. Is there anything that you want to avoid covering because you're just sick of the subject, or do you not mind?
No, man, I'm good.
Cool. Right. Hey.
I am ready to go on any topic. You tell me, we'll make it work.
All right. Sounds good. Dan Pask, you are too much. Watch the Oakland A's. Get out the chat. You crazy, crazy person. Oh, we got.
I'm gonna try and get the Twitch up so I can see the chat too.
Our audience is fairly split 50-50 between YouTube and Twitch. So
okay, perfect.
Yeah, works fairly well. Let's have a look. Hello to Kurt Steele, Michael Lucci's a Lone Wolf 21, Brandon Kerr, Brett DeWitt, Patman, Lions Blood, Big Aries. Cheers to you guys for all coming on. Dat Fan Man says, so would this be Eric's most exotic line stream to date? What do you mean? What do you... Oh, wow. Are you guys watching the YouTube stream right now? Ash? Ant?
Yeah. I've got it up now.
Many thanks to Jameson Hennessy for a $49.99 super chat, which is unbelievable. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. It says, love the show. Love Eric's podcast. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was great.
Nice.
Thank you.
What's
Guys.
Big Aries got on here? He's just clipped something. I'm just going to quickly watch it before we start recording.
Jeremy wants Devin White. Oh.
Yeah. We don't need to talk about Devin White. I'm not even going to mention him. It's pointless.
I'm comfortable with that.
Good. All right. You guys ready? Do you have the document that I've put up? Vaguely. Cool. All right. Here we go.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to a special edition of the Roar the Lions UK podcast. My name's Matthew Turner, alongside Anthony Fitzpatrick and Ashley Soden, and we are joined by a very special guest, Erik Schlitt, the managing editor from Pride of Detroit and co-host of the Detroit Lions Breakdown podcast. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. It's nice to see you again. I feel like it's been a long time. I know, like literally almost a year, right? A little over, maybe even. But I'm glad that we were able to reconnect again.
Yeah, me too. Last time, I think your wife got too happy inviting us over. But there we go. And thank you to Brandon De Bruin as well for the $25 super chat. That's absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Oh.
Right, let's crack straight on with chatting lines. And let's just take it back to the start and where we left off with you from last time. 2022 season, one of ups and downs. Started with downs and then had a heck of a lot of ups.
Yeah.
What do you think the season kind of told us as a whole? If you kind of step back from it and go, what do we know now that perhaps we didn't know then? I think, maybe there were some more substantial questions on whether Holmes and Campbell were it. Maybe they've been put a little bit to bed. I mean, do you think they developed during the season, or they just kind of stayed the course and the luck kind of evened out? What's your takeaway from the entire season, do you think?
Yeah, I do think there was a lot of skepticism early, right? And the company line was just, total line, stay the course, and we'll start to see the benefits of what we're doing. And that's really what we saw, right? We saw the hard work that they were putting in, as you said, like a couple of breaks started going their way, and then you kind of make your own luck when that happens. And the players, the players were always motivated to play for this coaching staff. The coaching staff is they're very much players coaches, and they are very good motivators. And so you kind of knew that was there, but you're seeing the benefits of that, or you saw the benefits of that in the second half of the season. You saw changes in philosophy. You saw a confidence, I guess. And when you're confident and you're getting breaks, and you can keep that momentum going. I thought they were able to overcome things that maybe they previously wouldn't have been able to. And a lot of that goes into, I think, gaining experience, coaching staff gaining experience, young team gaining experience. And so there's a lot of really positive things that set up really nicely at the end of the season that should be able to carry over moving forward as well, because this is still a young core. This is, for the most part, the coaching staff is still intact. And so you have a lot of the core pieces that found success and found a way to learn how to win still within the building. And so ideally they should be able to continue taking steps forward. And I think that's what most of the NFL is expecting, right? They're favorites to win the division, and
it still doesn't feel real when you say that, by the way.
And there's a lot of, positive energy around the team, locally, nationally, and it's all good vibes right now, especially with, the way the rest of the division is setting up. The Lions look like they're in good shape.
Are you buying into those good vibes there? It's taking the media hat off, because I know you have to try and rein this in a little bit with all that, but you as a fan, sort of what you've seen over the second half of the season, what you've seen in the off season, are you starting to get that little tingle now that things are changing, that things are going to happen that haven't happened in a long time with this team now in terms of success?
Yeah, look, I do think the recipe is there, and I do think that the cooks are cooking, and they're starting to make it work. You could get a lot of those vibes when they started stacking wins. Like, I felt really confident with that. I started gaining a lot of confidence then. But for me, the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back was the Packers game. I went all in on that game, and I was very boisterous. I was going on podcasts saying, we're ready to see what this team can do. And if they are what we think they are, they'll go in, they'll smack them around, and they'll get the win, even whether the game meant anything or not. And that's what happened. And that was a franchise defining moment in week 18. And so for me, that's it. I'm all in. I'm stockpiling Kool-Aid in my garage, and I'm passing it out and throwing it at anybody who wants to walk by, because I think everything is there for the taking, and it's set up the right way. And I'm very confident as a fan, as an analyst, and I'm excited for what's to come.
And okay, as the analyst, then when we're at 1-6, what for you was it that button that clicked? Because at 1-6, we were all starting to get very worried. It looked like things weren't going our way. We weren't getting the rub of the green, and then something just changed. People say it's maybe Campbell because of him, his personality, getting them to dig down. Some say a little bit luck went our way. What do you think it was that really started to turn it around?
I do think it's a lot of confidence and experience with the young players, right? When you have Kirby Joseph picking off Aaron Rodgers twice, that's a massive confidence boost. And then in the same game, Aiden Hutchinson is also picking him off. Like when your rookies are now starting to produce at high levels, that's you're starting to gain that energy. And then I really do think there's something to the fact of learning how to win, right? If when you kind of find that magic recipe and you figure out like, okay, we're close, but we're not figuring out how to finish games out. And then you figure that out and you see, okay, if we do this, it works. And then you do it again and it works. And you do it again and it works. Like you found the elixir, right? And I think that switch kind of happened with the younger players. I think the coaching staff got smarter and started learning from some of the mistakes they were making in the first half. And then there was also a kind of like this come to terms moment for the defense where they said, geez, we just cost Aubrey Pleasant his job. And we have to really look at ourselves and say, are we doing what we can do? And you saw different leaders step up, and they were, and that helped them, gain a little bit of success, and then that success just continued to build, and it worked. And again, I think you brought back like a guy like Isaiah Buggs, who was one of the catalysts of that meeting, and so you've got a lot of that core foundation in place that I think helped flip the switch and can keep it going.
Around the middle of the season as well, there was that sort of watershed moment where we traded Hawk, and I remember, at least personally for me, I had a bit of skepticism because I thought we could have got a bit more for him, and it felt we were setting ourselves short. And then obviously we go on that run where we have like the league lead in touchdowns for the tight ends in the red zone. Was that a big moment for you in terms of changing the offense? And then obviously with your mock draft roundup today, where we saw we're getting links with Kincaid, we get links with Musgrave as well, and all those, do you think we should maybe invest in another kind of that tight end, or do you think we have a type we should stick to that type of the more block first then receive kind of tight ends?
Yeah, I think if you can find a balanced tight end, that's the ideal trait that this organization will be looking for, and probably what they're missing. If they can find a tight end that can create balance, blocking is such a huge part of it. But if they can also find a tight end that can also be a seam stretcher or a really nice patch catcher, that's something that I think they would look to add if that opportunity presents itself. I don't think they're in a position where they're going to need to like reach, or where they're like, we absolutely have to get another tight end. At the same time, I don't think they would pass up a tight end if it was a player who's going to improve the roster. So the Hawk thing, I think a lot of the trades that we've seen, Hawkinson, even Okudah, those have been around, is this a player that's part of our future? Can we afford what this player gives us, and do we want to pay them? And if we can't, then why not try and deal this player and try and get some capital in return? And so Hawkinson, it does, when you look at what they got out of it, it doesn't look like a ton, but at the same time, upgrading a day 3 pick, which is usually a coin flip, up into a day 2 pick, which is usually a player that hits, that's a Brad Holmes staple. Take a player, increase that, or take a pick, increase that pick's value, and increase the likelihood that you're going to get a player that you can make successful. Gives you more draft capital to work with. And so I do agree with you. When I saw that Hawkinson trade, that I was like, well, that's a little light, but he upgraded a pick in each of this year and next year. And I think that's really the goal was, let's just get a little bit better position so that we can be flexible with our draft capital.
Just got a quick super chat to get to, $4.99 from Steve Shattuck. And actually this encapsulates how I feel about the development of the team, just going back to where we were and about MCDC and Brad Holmes. Steve says, I said after the 2021 season that I was confident saying when we win, not if we win. It kind of feels like you saying, it's kind of been building in the right way. But for all of the kind of improvements we've been talking about that they've made on both the kind of front office side and coaching side, where do you think the further room for improvement might be from these guys? What do you want to see in 2023 to kind of iron out things that maybe you still saw from them even in the latter end of 22?
Yeah, they still make mistakes. They're not perfect by any means, but this team as a whole, whether players or coaching staff, they tend to make a mistake and then try and adjust to it. And sometimes they'll make a mistake a couple of times, but you typically see them finding ways to flex out of it. One of my biggest gripes from the early part of the season was in fourth and short situations when they would pass the ball and they try and hit a stretch shot 27 yards down the field on 4th and 1 instead of just taking a simple 4th and 1 conversion, keeping the ball, keeping the play alive. And what we saw, twice they called those a play on 4th and short where they tried to throw the ball 20 plus yards down the field, and both times they were unsuccessful. And what we saw later in the season was the Jets game. I have XYZ and I hit the little check down, and then that check down ends up turning into a busted play, and he gets the game winner. And then in Green Bay, you saw it again. They huddle, they rush to the line and spread everybody out to create confusion, and then just run a couple of quick button hooks right in the little zone. And then he had 3 options that he could have chosen from. And so those little nuances show growth and development. And that's really what I think they can continue to do. Is they still have some mistakes that they make. They can still clean those up, whether it's late game decision making or just defensive adjustments early on in a game, as opposed to just trying to this was our game plan, let's stick to it. Kind of like what we saw in Carolina. They didn't really have an adjustment to move to. Now, whether it was injury or whatever, but they were late to make those adjustments. That I'd like to see improve but they've shown that they can, right? And so I think that's the encouraging part, is that there's errors, but there are fixable errors.
So up to this point, though, after 2 years, I mean, are you surprised by how quick someone say Holmes and Campbell have flipped this? Because let's say 2 years ago, we have a roster that is full of expensive veterans and not very good ones. The cap is in a mess. There's very little young talent here, and they inherit a hell of a bad situation. And even up to 12 months ago, when we were talking to you, it was like, well, year one's kind of happened. It was tough. They showed towards the end there's a bit of culture in there and that. But 12 months later on from there, the cap is in a very healthy situation. Holmes and Disney, not just be Holmes, but they have done wonders with the cap. We have players who are wanting to stay here, players taking pay cuts. We just miss out on the playoffs after going 1-6. Are you because when this started, we all thought this might be 4 or 5 years, something very long. Are you surprised by how quick this process is going?
Yeah, I think we were expecting them to be competitive in year 3, as opposed to competitive at year 1.5, right? In that halfway through that second year, when they kind of flipped that switch, there was a massive growth in development right then that I think we were expecting maybe to happen over an additional season because of the cap or whatnot. So it's almost like they had 2 seasons last year, right? From a developmental standpoint, they had that first half where they were struggling and working through it, and then they had that second half, which is kind of something I was expecting to see upcoming. And so, I am encouraged by that. So it is early, and so maybe that should give us a little bit of pause, because I think overall we were kind of expecting that kind of turning the corner to happen in year 3. And it seems like we were already past that. We've already seen them move past that. And so it is a little surprising, but at the same time, I think it was expected that this was the direction they were heading based on how they were working. Yeah, you pointed out the fact that their salary cap was in bad shape. They had to shed contracts. They had to do a lot of really bad tough decisions that put them in bad spots. They had to try and buy guys in free agency cheap, and they had to gamble on guys. Some worked, some didn't. They rewarded the guys that worked and shed the guys that didn't. And so, they've basically worked their way through all of them, all of those bad contracts. They cut a ton of them in year 1, but this offseason, really, I guess maybe the last 6 months, right? You've seen the Hawkinson deal was pending. the Kuda deal was pending. Those are gone. The Vaitai deal looked like a problem for a couple of years. The pay cut that you mentioned, the Romeo deal looked tough. He took a pay cut, right? And so I think the Lions said, look, we know what we need to do. This is what we think your value is. Either you were hurt or whatever, because all three guys that took pay cuts were all injured, right? And so the Lions approached them. They're very straightforward with their players, and they said, this is what we would like to accomplish. This is what we're willing to pay you. And if you're not willing to do that, we'll probably have to move on. And I think it says something about the culture that the players said, okay, I'll take that deal and I'll try and prove it, because again, this front office has a habit of rewarding players that prove it. And so honesty goes a long way with players, right? I mean, it's a very, very stark contrast to what we saw with the previous regime, where they were putting people down and being sneaky and not being upright out front and honest with the players. This regime, they will tell you the way it is, whether you like it or not. And sometimes it's hard information. We saw it on Hard Knocks, right? Like in that final episode of Hard Knocks, where they're like, look, you've done everything right, but it's just not enough, and we have to go in a different direction. And that's hard. But the players also appreciate that, and they know, okay, this is what they can do moving forward. And so I've gone off on a tangent here from your original question.
No, but it's stream of consciousness is a good thing. And actually, what you were saying about being brutally honest, it happened even before that in Hard Knocks, in the linebacker room, where you saw Shep talking to these guys saying, I'm going to have to start this bloody rookie if you don't buck up. And I started the bloody rookie, and how well he did. So, yeah.
But no, it's very pertinent, Eric. Like you're saying, 2 years ago, guys wouldn't be taking pay cuts. 2 years ago, free agents like Cam Sutton, they probably wouldn't want to come here for sort of the deals we've got on there. And this is everything that they've managed to flip everything in 2 years, whether it be the cap, the culture, the perception of everything around here, and they're getting it going. We had this discussion a few weeks ago about Holmes and Campbell, and I think we did a Sophie's choice between them about which one, if we could only have one of them. We got to the point, but do you think it's with Campbell and Holmes, do you think this is an absolutely perfect marriage between a GM and a head coach? Because I think if you get rid of either one of them, neither of them does as well as they have to this point so far. Do you think that would be safe to say that these two are actually quite perfect for one another?
I do think they're perfect because they work out of a similar mindset. And I think that was very purposeful, right? When the hiring team was working through candidates, they were looking for a specific type of person that had a specific type of vision. And I think both these two candidates aligned with that. And they didn't know each other before, but when they meshed together, it was almost effortless, right? And it's a very easy relationship. They're both very respectful of one another, and they both have this kind of same direction. This is the type of player that we want. This is the type of character that we want. This is the we're willing to be flexible with how we're building things, and then the ownership behind them is just like, okay, you want to hire, another scout? Good. Here's some money. You want to hire Brandon Sosna a year ago, and then now he's like your lead contract negotiator, and he's the one that's facilitating. I know Disner gets a lot of credit, but Sosna is really the magic guy behind all of these contracts. He's the chef, right? I mean, really, Disner's kind of the rest. If we're going to keep this with this restaurant thing, Disner's kind of like the GM, right? Of the general manager of the restaurant. He kind of oversees everything, but Sosa's really the chef, the purchaser, I guess. He's buying all these ingredients and he's finding the deals and he's getting these fresh ingredients, and then Campbell's the one that's in the kitchen making it work. And when you have this symbiotic relationship between them and this direct vision of an organization, then you get a chance to find the type of success that they're having, and that's why maybe the success comes a little bit earlier. I do think they can work in. It's almost like the same voice when you talk to them in a lot of ways, because they have the same message, the same direction, and the same idea of what they want the team to be and where they want it to go. And that goes a long way when you have a staff that can unify and have that same vision.
It's quite funny, actually, because if you have a look at them, and you're saying about how they work, how they're respectful of each other, but they're hugely passionate people, quite loud people too. You know, you hear their opinions, they're telling you forthright, but they listen very well too. And then they bring in, at the start of all of this, John Dorsey to kind of lead them through it. Another very passionate, very loud guy, but his reputation is one that doesn't particularly listen as much as others, and he always wanted to get his way. So maybe like having his voice as someone in there, but you don't have to take his word for it. And I mean, I've never come across people as passionate as them who have the ability to actually listen to other people's opinions. So I think they're rare commodities, really.
No, I agree with you. Like Dorsey is he's always been known as being like an instigator. His job is to look at the opposite side of what the groupthink is and try and create some friction to try and create a different way of looking at things, right? And he kind of did that originally, but at the same time, the level of respect that he's given makes his job really easy, and Holmes really leans on him to get advice, and he takes his advice. Like, I mean, if we look back 2 drafts ago, Holmes was, he was kid in a candy store in his first draft, and he was like, I want this guy, I want this guy, I want this guy. And he's willing to do whatever it takes he's calling on the phone to the other GMs. He's exploring all of his options, and he wants to trade up for Levi. And it's Dorsey that says, all right, take a beat. It's probably going to be there. Let's see how it plays out. And Holmes listens, and sure enough, he ends up getting him at the spot that he probably should have got him instead of trading up to reach. So it's really an impressive characteristic to be able to be that passionate and still not. It's an important characteristic to be the smartest guy in the room and not have the arrogance that you're the smartest guy in the room, right? To still be able to listen to others' opinions, take that, and then keep moving. Because I think when it comes to the draft, I think Holmes he's just drenched in talent, and he understands it at a level that it's just a rare commodity, and that's really where he excels. And he's got a staff around him that can help him, and he's willing to listen to them. And that's it's a rare trait to be able to have that combination of confidence yet willingness to listen.
And we're talking about all the guys in the room and everything here, but obviously there's one person at the top, where this all comes through, and ownership for years here has been a cause of gripes and that. But over the last 2 years with Sheila at helm, have you seen anything different from her in the terms of how she's running the team, or is it just a case of she's letting the guys in the know, trusting them, do their work, or is she getting quite into it as well? Is she quite forward with it all, or is she just letting them get on with it?
Well, I think she has a combination of both, right? She wants to be informed, but she also understands that she's going to let the people that she hired do their job, and she's not going to try and micromanage them. Her dad was a micromanager in a lot of ways, and it caused problems, and he forced some of his business side people onto the organization to work on the football side. And initially we kind of saw that with the hiring of Rod Wood. This is a guy who I know from the business side, and I'm going to hire him and I'm trust him. And then they quickly realized, okay, maybe Rod doesn't know the football side. And so that's when they went and got a guy like Disner. And they said, look, Disner's the best of both worlds. He can do the football side, he can do the business side. And now they've put him in a better spot and let Rod deal with just the business and not really, worry about some of the football stuff. Then you bring a guy in like Spielman, who basically has no role. He can just do whatever he wants, and they just give assignments to him. Like, that's something I don't think her dad would have even thought of, just hiring a guy who can just be like a liaison and disseminate information between groups. And first, have a guy that's as highly respected as Spielman and be able to talk him out of a cushy, TV job that he had to come and work for this. Like, that's awesome. And she reorganizes the office. She throws money at, look, Sosna is not cheap, right? And that was a new position that they created that she's just paying, right? And you see this with her in other avenues where it's, okay, players are getting injured. Why? It's the turf. Okay, let's replace it a year earlier than we were supposed to, because why wait? I don't want the guys getting hurt, so let's replace the turf early. You need another scout in this area? Great. Here's more money for that scout. You need a contract facilitator? Great. Here's more money. So she's been throwing money at them. She's not micromanaging. She's staying more informed. And it's a completely different style of ownership than what her mom or her dad did. Now, her mom was much better than dad, but Sheila she's got a great mind for it. And she's really, I think, hitting her stride. And she's only going to get better because she's only a couple of really years into this. She's really only 3 years, into the full decision-making, capacity. And so, like everyone else is getting better, she's going to get better at her job as well. And I'm excited to see what happens because she is not really holding anything back. And, you've seen departments expand, new ideas, new philosophies. It's all brought in, and it's all brought in on her dime, and she's willing to try and build a winner, and that's great. It's great to have an owner like that.
Let's move it on to free agency. Coming into it, I'm fairly certain we and everyone else said, "Oh, low key. Not going to invest too much. Maybe we'll bring back our own guys. That's what they did last time. Not expecting anything too fancy." And, I mean, I won't say that we've invested the world, but it certainly feels like we've gone a bit further than we would have expected at the beginning of this process, Erik.
Yeah, certainly. Because, I mean, Holmes even told us that, right? He even said, don't expect much. And then Campbell said, well, we're not going to go after the top guy because, we don't have to go after the top guy. We're not going to spend a ton of money. They both came out and they lied to us. I mean, that's really what happened. And so we were all expecting that, right? And the crazy thing is they've added all these guys. They've reworked all these contracts. And they're actually almost at the exact same spot they started free agency with money-wise. And that's because of the restructuring. That's because they've shed a couple of contracts. It's because of the way they designed the new contracts coming in. It's almost like they didn't have free agency. They just added all these players. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so high on Sosna, because his facilitation of the contracts combined with Disner's vision of how you want to operate, and then Holmes's purposeful intent with disseminated money. These are all important things that work together and really are encouraging for how they can approach a free agency, or how they did approach free agency, and how they can have put themselves in a spot where they can make decisions moving forward. You go into this draft. You want a quarterback? You have the option to take one. You don't end up with a quarterback? Well, you've already made an offer to Teddy Bridgewater, and he's just sitting there, and you can probably get him. They've got plans on top of backup plans, and the money has been utilized so that they can stay fluid and they can stay aggressive and they can keep their hand out. You want to make a trade? You can make a trade. You've got the room for it. You don't have to you aren't being held captive by the salary cap anymore. And that's what they've done, is just really been a really beautiful exercise in how to manage the cap, because it's really set them up in a much better way than we thought. And they've added a whole bunch of really good players that we also didn't think they would get, right? And so that's it's been a very nice offseason to cover.
Do you think that they've seen a window, Erik? Do you think this might explain the change in philosophy with them? Because obviously last year we finished well. You go up to Lambeau last week of the year, nothing to play for. They have everything. You go and win. And you look at the state of the NFC North now. The Packers are in flux. The Bears are rebuilding. The Vikings, I think we all agree, were not the 13-win team really that they were last year. Do you think Holmes has taken a look at the lay of the land and gone, right, there's an opportunity for us to get to the top of the, to win the NFC North, to move on, and
stay at the top of the conference. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were about to say it.
Yeah, but do you think they've seen a window, and do you think this might explain why they've maybe been a little bit more aggressive this time? Because opportunities to get to the top don't always appear, especially with the Packers and their Hall of Fame quarterbacks around all the time.
It may have influenced their free agency decisions. I don't think it influenced their overall philosophy, though, because I still believe that they are building this team to be sustainable and to be a sustainable winner for multiple years, because that's how you stay employed, right? And I think that's their goal. We all know they got 5 and 6 year contracts, right? Holmes got 5, Campbell got a 6-year contract, and so they had some job stability, but they've really are working this roster so that they can keep it where it's at. Like, if you look at how they're working the offensive line, it's beautiful. Like how they have their contracts spread out, they can get this offensive line, which is the strength of their team, which is what they're building everything around. They can keep the core together with just a couple of easy moves, and contractually they can make it work. It's really cool. I'm working on an article. We can talk about it more if you want to in a bit. But I do think that maybe they saw this opportunity and they were like, okay, maybe we'll be a little bit more aggressive than we were going to be in free agency. But I think the overarching philosophy of just trying to build a long-term winner, I think that's always going to take precedence over maybe a window. I get that. Look, I get that question a lot, because I think people see it. People see that opportunity in that window opening up. Vikings are probably going to regress. Aaron Rodgers probably isn't going to be a Packer. The Bears are the Bears. And so we're looking at an opportunity for a team that's ascending faster than we thought. So yeah, why not? Add a guy like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson when you didn't think he was maybe a guy that you could afford, or wasn't in your wasn't on your radar, or he was on your radar but you didn't think you could get him. Now that you're in a good spot, why not? Why not go after him? Because he's I can take the defense to another level type of player.
I think that this free agency has sort of pushed a reputation of Holmes league-wide up. Everyone knew he could draft well, but the fact he sort of recognised the opportunity and leapt for it. So I don't know if you've seen Greg Rovensfall's top 10 list of general managers. Holmes is 7. Is on it. He's above Gutekunst, Schneider, Jones, all these people have been around. Is the league finally waking up to how good Brad Holmes is overall, and not just as like a college scout in the draft?
Yeah, and I think, again, a lot of it comes from the fact that he has also surrounded himself with really talented people. His assistant GM, Ray Agnew, it was from the pro scouting side. And so I think Agnew needs to get a lot of love for what they did in free agency. And I think there's a reason why you've heard his name kind of whispered on the winds as potentially going to be a future GM, or at least a candidate for a future GM. I don't think he got an interview this year, but you could hear the whispers. I do think it's something that he's going to start getting interviews down the line. And he's one of those people that, Holmes has surrounded himself with. Now, look, they lost a guy like Dave Sears to Arizona, right? Dave Sears was the Brad Holmes of the Lions. He was their college director, and he took an assistant GM job with the Cardinals. But the way that their front office is built is they're able to. It's sustainable. Like they can promote from within. They have cross learning between departments. They have other people in place. You talk about the guys like Dorsey and Spielman and all those other guys that are contributing. Like it's a huge spider web of smart people, and they feed Holmes, but Holmes is the orchestrator of that. Like Holmes is the he's got his orchestra, and he's the conductor up there with the sticks, and he's the one that's put them all in place, and he's making all of them play the music that he wants, and then he's presenting this great musical for us all. And so I do think he's getting the draft is his bread and butter. I think this was definitely an off season where it was like, it was an eye opener for the rest of the league, because like you said, the stuff that they were able to accomplish in free agency, still staying fluid with the cap. It was just, it's wins across the board for Holmes this offseason.
I'm going to just get on to a little bit of draft, and then we'll address a load of the questions that have come in, try and rapid fire them, although I know it's not perhaps your strong point with the breakdown podcast, but there we go. Okuda trade. Obviously that happened, and it's a real shame that he's gone, and maybe it wasn't as much as the fans were hoping that we get for him. Does it?
Yeah.
I know that we're being, and then you wrote an article on this, that the Lions are being mocked more often now, a cornerback at 6, even more than they were being doing before. Do you think it's made it more likely, or not? Because there's such strength in depth at the cornerback position in the draft that I'm not even sure it does. Aren't the starters kind of here already? And is it not right to perhaps bring on a more developmental guy, which is kind of where they were going anyway? I saw Jerry ahead of Jeff at this point, so getting rid of cornerback 4, is it like, does that really impact the draft? I don't know.
Yeah, I think based on last season, that's a fair assessment to have Jerry ahead of Jeff, which is, I think, a little bit surprising, but in hindsight, it makes a ton of sense. Like at the end of the season, Jeff found the bench and Jerry was on the field. And I mean, it's pretty black and white right there. Right. So I do think trading away outside cornerback 4, who costs $10 million, doesn't really change your overall philosophy, right? On need, right? It doesn't make a cornerback any more of a need than it was previously. You do have long-term potential concerns that you have to worry about, which makes corner potentially a high value pick because while you have like Gardner Johnson and Mosley and Jerry, all of them are on the last year of their contract, right? You only have Sutton and Lucas are the only 2 guys that are under contract next year. And so when you look at like long-term and you say, boy, if they add a guy like Devin Witherspoon, now you have 2 foundational corners on the outside. And then if you're going to re-sign Gardner Johnson, well, now we can keep this secondary intact, especially with returning the safeties who will now have even more experience. So adding that outside corner or re-signing a couple, some of these guys that are on expiring contracts, those are all ways to help maintain the level of play in the secondary. But I still think corner is one of those positions where I could see them taking it at 6 or 100 and whatever their last pick is, right? 181, I think it is, right? So I could see him taking the corner at any of those spots because they do need depth. That is an important facet. And adding a guy at the top just makes your depth stronger. Right. And it's an easy sell. Like if you draft a guy at 6, well, he's probably going to be your starter next year, if not your starter this year. And it's the same thing with the offensive line. They're going to need a guard next year, whether they re-sign Jonah Jackson or not. And so if you draft an offensive lineman in your top, 50 picks, 55 picks, with one of those 4 picks, well, you can help maintain your offensive line stability. And so there's something to be said for investing in positions of strength this year, because those positions of strength will help the core foundation stay strong.
So, with the TJ trade, we've seen obviously they've been able to move up their draft picks this year with Jeff. They've traded from, they've got more capital in there. We know how Brad likes to work. Brad has his guys, and he said he's sometimes had to be talked out of trading up and down. But given how they're sort of stockpiling here, do you expect to see a lot of movement from him on draft day to try and get his specific guys, especially with the roster as it is now, where, he has a bit more flexibility to do that? Do you expect to see them move quite a bit here if they need to?
Yeah, I mean, if history tells us anything, it's that he will be moving, right? He's moved multiple times in each of the drafts, and he has a penchant for saying, this is the guy I want. And he has a great ability to read the value of a player and where that player is projected to go, and then jump in just ahead of where that guy should be picked and then take him, right? And he gets great value doing that way. So yeah, adding capital helps him stay more fluid. But I absolutely think it's going to be I like this guy. He's a difference maker. He can be a pillar of what we want to build on. Let's just go get him, right? So like if they move up from 18, it wouldn't be surprising to me, right? If they move back from 6, I think moving back from 6 would be more surprising than moving up from 18, just because he's such an aggressive GM that if he gets a guy and he thinks, okay, I can add 2 pillars in this draft, then I'm going to do it. It's what he did last year. It's why he went and got Jameson. He said, this is a top 5 player that we're going to get at 12 if we trade up. So why not go get him?
So you meant, sorry, Matt, go on.
No. Ash,
I was about to say,
I apologise in advance because the guys are probably going to groan because they can guess who this question is.
Oh, don't.
Everybody.
Me and you, Eric, share a particular favourite player in the draft. I've tweeted you about him a couple of times, and yeah, you can see Ant's head in the face. At 81, do you think the value would still be there to take a guy like Jamie Robinson, obviously the hybrid defensive back? Or do you think with having Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on the 1-year deal and having Will Harris back on the vet cap minimum special deal, do you think the value's there, or should we pivot to something else like a running back like Israel Abadakanda or a wide receiver like Puka Nacua, someone who could maybe have a more instant impact on the team?
It's a tough question because I do think there is room to add one more player in the secondary. I think conventional wisdom says if you take a guy that is an outside corner, it makes a lot of sense, immediate and long term. I think the Gardner-Johnson addition really threw a wrench in a guy like Jamie Robinson's chances. Same thing with Brian Branch. I'm a big Brian Branch fan, but I think it throws a wrench in the works a little bit. But the fact that Gardner-Johnson is only on 1-year deal, the fact that Will Harris is on a 1-year deal. And honestly, I don't expect Will Harris to be this like stationary slot guy anymore. I expect him to be this fluid piece that they move all over depending on what they want. I think the idea when they brought Will Harris back was to put him in this role and then bring in a rookie and let that rookie challenge. I think when Gardner-Johnson came in, they were like, okay, well, everyone forget everything else. We just added this impressive athlete. And now we have Will Harris, who has started at outside corner, who's started at safety, right? And so why not use him as we have an injury at safety. Let's move Will back there for depth. Oh, we lack outside corner depth this week. Let's move Will to the outside. I envision Will as being a guy like that. So if you move Will, you could always use him as a backup to Gardner-Johnson, like if Gardner-Johnson were to get hurt. At the same time, it also, if you're moving Will, it also opens the door to add a guy like a Jamie Robinson, who could be that backup, who could be that developmental guy, and could just give you a little bit more opportunity to be a little bit more creative with how you utilize your back-end players. It's why I think if they were going to draft a linebacker, it's going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be a linebacker that can cover as opposed to a traditional Mike linebacker, because it's going to be a guy, in my opinion, that they can utilize as kind of like a matchup piece. And so I think Robinson gives you some of that from a secondary standpoint. A guy like Trenton Simpson gives you that like from a linebacker standpoint, which is why I kind of think Trenton Simpson could be a guy that is kind of low key on the radar. I still don't think they value linebacker really high, but I do also think like Simpson is one of these kind of chess piece movement pieces. And there's a couple of like guys in the secondary, like Jamie Robinson, like Brian Branch, who they don't represent like a clear path to the field, but Aaron Glenn's philosophy is just give me football players and I'll find a way to use them. And so that's why I think these hybrid players are always still going to be like on the fringe of being in play. And if they think the value is there, they can still go after them. At the same time, I love Abanikanda. I think Abanikanda is great. And if you don't take a running back in the up until that point and like Spears is gone, well, Abanikanda is my next guy. Like I think I love the upside on him. And so I would probably still take Abanikanda even after my whole spiel about getting those hybrid defensive guys. I still think a running back is there's real good value at that kind of 55 to 81 range.
So you've probably been asked this 100 times already, but the Cardinals say 6 teams have been in touch with them in terms of trading up to 3. I know it's been a question put out there that maybe the Lions are one of them. Do you reckon they are one of the serious guys looking at that? And do you get the feeling that maybe could be one of the things that they do is they're going to go up there, whether it be for a quarterback, whether it be for Will Anderson? Do you reckon that's something he would do this year?
I do think he's one of the 6 that's exploring it because that's just his nature, right? He wants to know what the value is of the picks around him. I don't know if he would do it though, right? Because I think there's a big difference in cost going up to 3 as opposed to going up to like 12, right? So I don't know where that kind of cost lands, right? If Houston ends up, messing around and they end up taking the defender and like there's a guy like that's one of the top 2 quarterbacks is there, well, maybe they take a harder look at them. Look, they brought CJ Stroud in for a top 30 visit for a reason. And maybe that reason was, I know what it's going to cost to move up with Arizona. If Houston doesn't take Stroud, and we like Stroud, and do we like the cost to move up to get him? I don't know. Or is Will Anderson so appealing? Like we brought Willie, we saw them bring Willie Anderson in for a top 30 visit. It's maybe that same scenario. It's okay. We know the cost. We know where we value Will. Is Will worth the cost to move up and go? So I do think the visits that they brought in and I do expect that they're one of the teams just because that's what Brad does. He wants to know all the cards. He wants to see everybody else's cards. He wants to know what they are so that he can make the most informed decision when it comes down to improving the team. So will he do it? I don't think he will. My gut is I don't think he will move. I think the cost is too high. You look at the trade charts and the cost is only like one of their 2nd round picks, right? But in reality, it's probably a lot more than that. So I don't know if he'd be willing to start giving up like future high picks and stuff like that in order to move up. If he was able to give up a 2nd and a 3rd, yeah, I think he'd do that. But I think the cost is going to be much higher than that this year.
Let me crack on with some of these viewer questions just to get through them. So there's a lot, and I don't want to keep you too long because we've been going a while already. Paul on our Discord channel asks, how is your Holmes influence traits list coming along? Do you have any idea of specific measurables in specific positions that they like or don't like?
It's coming along. The hard part is gaining data, right? So if you don't know, when Quinn was around, I had this Quinn chart where I identified traits that they identified for their Patriot system, and they would draft players based on those traits. And so I've been trying to organize a similar system where you can identify physical traits that Holmes has a preference towards at certain positions. The difficult thing is, while Holmes was able to identify things for the Rams, you see a lot of the Saints influences in this type of players. So I can't necessarily go back to the Rams draft history and just use that to add to my data pool. Because it doesn't come straight from there. It's this blend of philosophies. So I'm very limited in how much data I have, and it's not really enough for me to make these like big sweeping proclamations. The only thing that I've kind of seen hold true from an athletic standpoint is with the defensive backs. When Holmes was in LA, he helped them create a benchmark system for athleticism and defensive backs. It was minimal things for body type. Like the player only has to be like 5'10", 180 pounds, which is minimal. And they didn't even really care too much about arm length. But what they wanted was players that could run under 4.4, They want and jump over 40 inches in the vertical and jump over 10 feet in the broad, which in reality it's actually closer to 11 based on the data I've seen. So if you can find a guy that's sub 4.4, can jump over 40 inches and can jump over 11 feet in the broad, then you've got a guy that is going to, fit the athleticism mold. Well, there's 3 players in this draft that stand out with that. And one of them is Christian Gonzalez. One of them is Jeremy Banks. And that's, I guess, unsurprising why these are guys that are talked about in the first round with the Lions, is because from an athleticism standpoint, it kind of meets some of these parameters that you look at. Like, and when you look at like the Lions, like who they've drafted, Melifanu, he wasn't sub 4.4, but he was in the 4.4s, and he jumped over 40 and he jumped over 11. And then you look at Chase Lucas, again, he wasn't under 4.4, he was in the 4.4s, but he jumped, let me get his number. He jumped 39 and he jumped like 10 3/4. So like he's right on that kind of fringe. So if you start
for a round 7 guy,
these,
they're willing to accept.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, you're right, exactly. And so like Gonzalez, Banks, they fit the mold that was created, that Holmes helped create in LA. So you would think these 2 guys fit. At the same time, Aaron Glenn uses a ton of Saints philosophies in order to identify players that work in his scheme, which is why you have guys like Devin Witherspoon in the conversation, because he fits stylistically with that, which is why Brian Branch is in this conversation, because he has a lot of Garner Johnson type things, right? And so it's a hard blend trying to find this system. And so I don't have it finalized yet, but there are little things that kind of jump out. The one sleeper that I would say to keep an eye on that kind of fits the system, if they don't end up taking like a corner early, is another Maryland corner, Jacorian Bennett. He also fits this profile. He is a guy who I thought is very fluid of an athlete. You can see that the measurables match what he puts out there. And he's a guy that most people are looking at kind of like on day 3. Even if it's maybe in the early parts of day 3, maybe he sneaks in the back end of round 3. But Jacorian Bennett is a guy I think people need to keep on their radar if the Lions don't go corner early.
He looked super impressive in the combine, generally in the drills as well. I was really impressed.
Yeah,
sorry.
Really smooth.
No, sorry. So just kind of maybe to tack on to that hit list question just a bit. They talk about wanting guys who love football, they've got to live it and breathe it. And they said after the combine, there were only a few guys who kind of ticked all the boxes there. Is there a way that you have to try and kind of figure out who those guys are, or is that just a complete mystery as to what they actually mean by it? Because it could be such a broad spectrum thing. The love of football could mean 100 different things.
Yeah, it's a mystery. Yeah, there's nothing I can really do, unfortunately. And that's one of the key catalysts, right? I think a lot of those things that they come up with are based on interview processes, and that's just stuff that we don't have access to. And I wish we had the access that they do. At the combine, Campbell said they talked to like 35 guys or something like that at the time, and like 6 of them, I think it was 6 that he said, like stood out as guys so that he could tell immediately. And so all of us immediately went to our lists of who have they talked to and who could it be. That's kind of where Jamie Robinson popped into the conversation, because Jamie Robinson is very much a football guy who loves football. And he met with them at the combine. And so I think a guy like Sam Laporta he got brought up then too, another guy who likes football at a position where they might take a tight end like in round 2 or something like that. And so those were kind of like early, speculative, guesses. But at the same time, we only know like 10 or so players that they met with at the combine. And in reality, they met with like 40, right? Or 45, I think is what they get. So we really don't even know, we only know we don't even know a third of who they met with. So I don't know. I don't know who it could be. Maybe it's Trenton Simpson. They met with him at the combine. You know what I mean? Like it's really unfortunately we just don't have that kind of access. And unfortunately, it's one of the biggest key components in decision making for this regime.
Going to move on to some of the more of the questions that we've had. Carlton on our Discord asked, who have been your worst picks or crushes in previous drafts and why, and what have you kind of learned in your evaluation process along the way, which I think is a really interesting non-draft question. Previous draft question as opposed to 2023.
My worst was when I first started. This was probably, like 15 years ago. There was a player at Michigan named Ernest Shazor. He was a safety. He was a big hitter. He had all the traits you would look for. He kind of like, he had like these like, he had a knack for making big plays. He was coming off a season where he made some really big plays. He declared as a junior, and I was like, man, everything says this guy is going to be a high pick. I had him. It's like a top 50. I had him going. I'm like, he's a second rounder. I'd love to see him go. And then he went undrafted. And so I was like, I have no idea like what I did wrong, but like, I think what the learning lesson for me there was as a Michigan graduate, I was like, maybe I'm, looking at him with rose-colored glasses, and maybe I'm looking at this player that I enjoyed watching as a fan, and saying, maybe he's not as what did I miss in his projection? Because I was way off on him, and so I tend to be a little bit harder, I think, on Michigan players now.
That does the same.
Yeah. And I think that probably stems from that miss. And there's plenty of like misses. We all have them. I think quarterback's one of the hardest ones. I tend to think I have a good beat on some quarterbacks, and they're just so hard. Me and every other NFL GM out there, right? But yeah, I think Shazor was the one that really was my, okay, I'm doing something wrong. Because to tell you what, this was the same draft where Aaron Rodgers was in. So that's how long ago it was, right? I actually correctly picked where Aaron Rodgers would go. When he didn't get picked at 1, I said, he's going to go right here. Somebody's going to jump the Bears and take him. And that's Green Bay did that. They jumped the Bears and they took him. And so like, I really felt as confident as I ever had. And then I just watched Shazor just stay at the top of my board for the next like 18 hours or whatever it was over that. Like, and so like, it was a very quick kick in the butt reality check. Because I had to really like look at what was I missing? And I do think I am a lot harder on Michigan players now, and people don't believe me, but I tend to be.
Talking on that point, we've got a comment from someone called Jeremy Reisman. Think you've heard of him. Says Erik has never said anything good about a University of Michigan prospect since.
I love Touch. And I got called a homer for that one. But I thought Hutch was a first rounder. I think we talked about this last year. I thought Hutch was a first rounder, and if he would have came out in 2021, and I think he might have been the first edge taken in 2021. And then he went back to school, and so I was like, when he by the next year, I was like, he was already way up at the top of my board. I think I had him like as a top 15 player in 2021. I was way high on him, and I really didn't want to be because again, I turned nice. But that's one of the reasons why I was so high on Hutchinson last year was because he had already been a guy that I was like super fond of. And so Michigan school or not, I didn't care. I was kind of all in on him right from the jump. Even, from 2021, I was sold on him.
Sorry for that interjection there. I had to get that in there for Jeremy. He's going to suffer if we beat them in football. Or beat you, if you're going to partake in that as well. Just on the side, as he told you about our wagering that we'll beat you in some, like, pick-up football when we come over next year.
No. Oh, gosh. I assume you will. You all look in better shape than us. Oh. We got a good punter on staff. So we need to have Hamza just kick the ball, forever. But yeah, I'm way past my athleticism days.
Well, yeah, you and me both. Let's get to some more questions. Brandon Kerr has a really interesting question from the YouTube chat, and he says, we've been talking about offensive line, trying to reinvest for the future in that position, but kind of the starter seems set right now. Are there any kind of potential day 3 candidates at offensive line? Because we're seemingly so good at training some of these guys up, and potentially the best offensive line coach in the league, as a homer, I'm going to say so anyway. Maybe we can develop some of these guys and not have to take one high. So is there anyone in your radar with maybe that new 5th round pick that we have?
It's hard to if you base your prediction on what other people are saying about prospects, then yes, I have some guys that people are kind of low on. One of my favorite sleeper picks is a guy named Anthony Bradford from LSU. He's actually from Michigan. He played at Muskegon, and he is a right guard who excels in the gap scheme. He's a gap power guy. He's got great movement skills. I believe his RAS was the highest amongst the interior offensive linemen.
Oh, wow.
He had a 9.8, I think is what it was, or 9.81, something like that. And Bradford is, if you didn't catch him at the combine, he's an easy mover. Really, he can pull. He's got lots of power. He's 6'4", 330. He's a guy who, I think, like I said, a lot of people are kind of low on. My guess is the NFL isn't as low on him, or maybe it's just me not being as low on him. I think if you took him at 81, I'd probably be fine with it. That's how highly I think of him. If you can get him in the 5th round, all the better, right? Because there's I think the Draft Network has him as a 5th. I think PFF has him as a 6th. I think NFL has him as a 4th. So and I think Brugler has him as a 4th as well. But he's a guy that I think is kind of under the radar. That would be, you draft him now and he could start for you a year from now. If you don't end up taking a lineman early, he's a guy that I like a lot as a reserve.
He's 144 on the consensus board that I've built between the 5. So kind of that puts him in early day 3 range, I guess.
Yeah, look, I think he could be a top 100 guy. I think that's his level. And maybe he's not a guy who wins a starting job this year against Vitae or Graham, but there's enough potential and athleticism and power and understanding of the gap scheme that I think Hank Fraley could turn him into a starter in just a year.
Another question from the Twitch chat. Awkward Yeti 40 asks, or there's a statement and then a question. Seems like Brad has identified an injured player in the last 2 years to grab the value as they fall in Levi and JMO. Are there any injured players this year that would be a steal in round 2 that is falling due to injury? I have Voorhees in my head, but I think he'll be a round 5, round 6 pick and just redshirt him for a year. But is there anyone maybe a bit higher up?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've really looked at injuries as a catalyst to draft someone for value, but it's an interesting way of looking at it. I'm going to roll through my kind of chart real fast.
Ash, who have you got on the tip of your tongue?
He's crossing his fingers for Garrett.
He's got somebody.
Yeah,
Garrett Williams.
I knew it. He was crossing his fingers for Garrett.
Garrett Williams, this Syracuse cornerback.
That's a good shout.
Didn't they just bring him in too?
Yeah, I linked you the tweet about his top 30 visit.
There you go.
He, for me, coming into this year before the ACL, was a first-round corner. And then obviously he tore his ACL week 4, I think. And I know he played mostly in the zone scheme with Syracuse, but he just has the characteristics to play off man for us. So I think he'd be perfect fit to sort of groom and then bring in next year when Mosley and Co are gone.
He was a guy who was on my radar ahead of the season. And I think I actually had him on a watch list. And then I think I think I had him on a watch list like the week after. Like I didn't realize he tore his ACL, and because I remember getting called out for that. That someone was like, yeah, he's hurt, and I was like, all right. But yeah, he was a guy I know the PFF guys really like him. I think they have him as like a day 2 guy. I think Draft Network has him as like a day 2 guy. So yeah, I think he could be a guy. He could. I mean, maybe he's that guy. I've been scanning my list. I don't have a great answer, unfortunately. So maybe Ash just answered it for us. There you go.
Just a little quick pivot there. We're talking about Syracuse corners. Well, we have one on the roster at the minute.
We do.
Well, he's not a corner anymore, but is there still a future for him? I think I didn't like the move to safety. I think he's better on the outside. Do you think they try him back outside again, or do you think they're just going to carry on hammering away at safety, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work?
I think they're going to keep him at safety. I think if they were going to switch him back, they probably would have done it in season last year because there was a need. It would have been easy to try and get him back to his roots. And then try and get him on the field. But the fact that they stayed the course, they kept pushing him at safety. Then they even started him at safety at one for a game, 2 games? Or man, I'm not sure if he started that second one, but he played a couple. I do think that he's probably going to stay there. And in my mind, he's also a guy who could develop into the hybrid Gardner Johnson type role, where he can be your slot matchup guy who can be physical. But the thing that really appealed to them most was how good he was in off coverage. And that off coverage really translates to safety, I think. And so my guess is he sticks there.
All right, couple more. I'm going to stretch it just a little bit. Hope you have a little bit more time.
We're good.
Sure. Okay. Ask that one. Frog Crop has just a conceptual question about next year's defense, given the investment we've had and what might happen in the draft. Frog Crop on YouTube asks, fellas, is it possible that Detroit can have a top 12 to 15 defense next year?
I think I think it's optimistic. I think it's in the realm. But it's one, because we haven't seen, they're not done building it, right? They're not done building the defense, and if they take 2 defenders in the first round, then that's going to increase the potential of where they can go. My hope is that they can get to about 20, right? Because at the end of last season, they were operating, like if you only look at like those last cluster of games and you look at how they were operating in those last cluster of games compared to the rest of the league, they were operating as like a mid-tier defense. And when you have a defense that's even operating mid-tier and then a top 5 offense, you can win games. You can get to the playoffs. Like those are things that you can do. So if they can get to 20, great. You've set the team up to success. If they can get to 15, oh, well, now expectations are going to get really high for me. So I'm trying to set my bar a little lower, and I'm targeting top 20, and we'll see if they go better. Then that's a cherry on top for me.
All right. Lost Phobia in our Discord chat asks, what 2 guys do you want in the draft? Any round, any player, doesn't have to be high. In fact, if it isn't high, maybe we'll shine some light on some people who don't get talked about too much. So maybe non-first round picks, 2 guys that you just love to have here.
It's hard because you fall in love with a lot of guys, right? Because you start to find guys like if you said, like, if you picked a position, I could tell you a lot easier than just looking at it as a collection, right? But let me think.
I mean, so who's your pick of the tight end group then that maybe isn't around 1 tight end?
Well, I don't think Darnell Washington goes in round 1. I think he's on that fringe, right? I think people are going to look at a Kincaid, and I think Kincaid could be maybe the first guy off because he's arguably the best pass catcher. Pass catchers tend to go earlier, right? Mayer's a little bit more balanced, whereas Washington, I still think he could sneak into that, but if he doesn't, I think Washington is the best fit. But if you're talking about like guys that aren't in that top like 7, because those top 7 guys, I think, well, top 6, I think are all kind of guys that could maybe are flirting with round 1. But if you get past him, Davis Allen from Clemson is an interesting guy. He's a guy who's going to be in that kind of fringe, late day 3, early day 4. Maybe you get him in the 5th. He's good blocker, good run blocker, good pass catcher. He can be a red zone target. He's an interesting guy at tight end.
All right.
You want to know? Oh, no, tight end. All right.
No. If you have another one,
I'm happy. Let me think. Let me think for a second. I know I'm kind of dragging you on here.
No. I mean, I'm happy to go on forever here, but I'm just conscious of. So I know there's a lot of love for someone like Desjuan Johnson from Toledo, although he might be a really late guy. Someone in the chat in Detroit versus Everybody in the YouTube chat just said, "Has Erik talked about a certain USC edge defender yet?" So, do you have some love for Tui Pelotu?
I don't have a lot. He's not a guy that I'm like, all rah-rah for. I could see the fit. I kind of see him though in the same mold as like your Josh Pascal and your Don Kaminsky. And so I don't know if there's a path to the field as easy for him as if you have an edge player who has a little bit more versatility. It's hard with the edge guys, like a couple of the guys at the very top are very fun. And then after that, it becomes, well, are you looking at a guy who's just going to be like a situational pass rusher in year 1? Or are you looking for a hybrid guy who's kind of in the James Houston mold, who can be more of a special teams contributor as well as maybe a situational pass rusher, a guy. So for that, like Yasir Abdullah from Louisville, he is in a lot of ways like James Houston. So I'm going to pause this thought to kind of bring something in, and I'll make it connected. I promise. Last year they used 6 off the ball linebackers on a game day basis. 3 of them played defense. 3 of them played special teams. What they discovered late in the season was that there is an opportunity for them to utilize James Houston more. And to do that, they operated in like a 5-2 front against the Bears. So to shut down these run defenses and these mobile quarterbacks, they had tried just their base, and their base wasn't cutting it. So when they added the James Houston role and they went to more of like a 5-2 look, it helped them contain the mobile quarterback in a more efficient way. They actually didn't go to it till like the second quarter, which is when you started to see Fields shut down a little bit more. So I think they may lean into this 5-2 and may want to add a little bit more depth. Now you have Julian Aguara, but if you want to add another late round edge rusher, a guy like Yasir Abdullah would fit that mold. And you can take away one of those off the ball linebacker guys who was only playing special teams. And why not make that guy just an edge guy instead? Like they all fit into that same range. So now instead of having 6 off the ball guys, now you have 5, and then you have you have an extra hybrid guy, because I think there's more value in adding these hybrid guys. So if I'm adding an edge rusher late, that's the type of guy that I'm going to be looking for. The Yasir Abdullah hybrid linebacker / edge rusher guys. So that's what I'd be paying attention to.
Couple of comments.
Would you go for some of the higher versions of that? Say Drew Sanders. He would be the one who would fit that, and he's got so much growth to do still. You're not even seeing the best of him, and he's still one of the best. Do you reckon that might be another way as well if they're going to sort of do that route?
I think Drew was moved off the ball because that's probably where his future is. In a lot of ways, like Derek Barnes was moved off the ball and he stayed there in the NFL. And like Tremaine Edmonds, when he was at Vatech, he was that kind of hybrid edge rusher guy. And when they moved him off the ball, and they kept him off the ball in Buffalo. And so I think Sanders is going to be more in that mold. I don't think he's as dynamic a player as like a Micah Parsons, who can kind of be this like legit hybrid type guy. I get the appeal, and maybe he will develop into that. And that's definitely becoming something that's more trending in the NFL. I'm just not buying into Sanders in that way. And if you're spending an early pick, then you're going to be trying to force him on the field a little bit more, which then cuts into your value of having James Houston, which is why I'm more inclined to lean with a developmental type player that can add you more depth, as opposed to a guy you're going to spend a pick and then try and find a way to work him onto the field.
A couple of comments from the chat. One from Polar Knights, which made me laugh out loud, out of context. But he said, "I love the show. It is the perfect evolution of beard growth." Apologies if you're on the audio pod, but for me around, that's absolutely excellent. Jeremy saying that Eric's looking to unemploy Anthony Pittman, which I think is unfair, but I see where you're going with it. Dan Pask asking about Tyree Wilson and whether he's high on pass rush win rate, considering Hutch and Houston being 1 and 2 last year in the rookies. I'm looking at PFF now. He improved to a 80 grade in their pass rush success grade or whatever that is, which isn't quite ESPN's pass rush win rate metric, but it's got to be somewhat linked. So he's quite high on that aspect. Anyway, I've got a really nice fluffy question to finish, but I've got a couple more left to do.
I'll go if you're looking.
Yeah, you go.
Okay, so this is sort of moving more towards the future now, Eric. But Brad Holmes, the whole point of the growth here: draft their players, pay their players. That's how they're going to build the team. It's been a long time since we've seen a really big deal handed out to players, given the situation with bidding. Obviously, the first pressure point may come next year with a guy who's not theirs. But we mentioned Jonah Jackson earlier, the ability, whether he's going to get paid, whether he's here or not. I know he's not one of theirs, but he strikes me as being the guy they probably would have gone for anyhow. If he has another good year, we've just seen a guy like Chris Lindstrom get absolutely, a bucket from the Falcons for buying that position. If he has another good year, do you really expect them to have a run at trying to keep him here? Because people say, God, it's not expensive. Because obviously, if you're drafting guys for the future, you've got to pay them as well to show them that at the end of it, they're going to be a part of the future here. Do you expect them to really have a go at him, even if he has quite a hefty price tag?
I do, and I think I'm a little bit in the minority on that, because I know there's other beat writers that don't think he's going to get paid, but I think there's a path, right? He makes a lot of sense to retain. He is a Pro Bowler, right? He's got that Pro Bowl under his belt. He's got that movement. He's got that nasty demeanor that they kind of like on the field, but he's a real good guy off. He gets along with everybody, and there's I think a path to do it. I don't think he's going to get like Lindstrom type money, but I think he's going to get he's in line for a significant raise. If you look at how the offensive line is laid out, all of their starters have expiring contracts in different years. Okay. So it's kind of like this tiered out system. Right now, let's say the Lions took a rookie at 18. Okay. We'll just give you a high price tag on a rookie. And they took that rookie, and his goal is to be right guard of the future. All right. If you factor in his contract plus the contracts that they have for the contributing offensive linemen, they're going to cost around $56 million, which is around 25% of the cap. And so in order to keep the offensive line a strength, you can allocate about 20. You should be allocating about 25% of your cap towards it. Now, next year, you're going to have Vaitai, Jackson, Glasgow all come off the books. Okay. Frank Ragnow's contract actually dips. He's going to make $4 million less next year than he is this year. And if you have a rookie who's also lowering the cost in at right guard, well, you've got room to add Jonah Jackson, because the cost of Decker, Sewell, Ragnow, and a rookie who you took even in the first round is only going to cost you around 20% of the cap. So you could still allocate about 5% of the cap to Jonah. Now, the way they backload contracts as well, he's not going to cost the 5% of the cap. He's not going to cost $10 million or whatever, right? So you have that flexibility to re-sign him with this backloaded deal. And then you have these other staggered contracts that can allow you to address the following year. So the following year, Taylor Decker's contract is up. But again, if you have Frank Ragnow, pick 18, and Sewell, even though he's going to probably be on his 5th-year option, which is going to be like 18 million. And even if you have Jonah at 10%, well, guess what? They're still at around 20% of that projected cap. So they could then, if they wanted to make a decision on Decker, they could, because they're still going to have that like 5% to play with. And it keeps going like that. The following year, Sewell's contract is up. But guess what? All the other contracts are in reasonable spots, and they're going to be at around 20%, and they're going to have about 5% of the cap to spend on the next guy that comes up. So when you look at how this is tiered and how they're spread out, they can absolutely re-sign Jonah. They can re-sign Taylor in 2 years. They can keep this offensive line intact for a half decade or more because of how the contracts are laid out. And you can keep a strength to strength. One of the keys, though, is you got to get a rookie that hits on the offensive line this draft, because you need that rookie contract to help you facilitate all these other bigger contracts that are due. And if you have that, it can be a first rounder. It doesn't matter. But if you find that rookie this year that hits, that can be your staple at right guard, gold. The whole offensive line, you can manage that offensive line for a decade. But you got to hit. You got to hit them this year. It's a big priority for me.
Junie asked in our Discord, how many UDFAs do you expect the Lions might sign this year? And is there any guys you expect to be UDFAs that might be priorities for you? I know that this is kind of like a question for frantically looking at Saturday afternoon, evening time. But
sure.
Any kind of projected priority guys?
Well, so they have 69 guys under contract right now. They have 8 draft picks, which will put them at 77 players.
9
if
now.
They keep, I'm sorry, 9 now. 9 now. So that will keep them at 78 players. So that would give them 12 open spots if they wanted to sign UDFAs. Last year they signed 12. The year before they signed 13. So they could add 10 UDFAs and then still have maybe a spot or two for a guy like Teddy Bridgewater if they need him, or maybe another veteran if they need him for a different spot. So they can sign anywhere from 10 to 12 guys. If Brad Holmes trades and he comes out with less than 9 drafted rookies, then it gives them a little bit more freedom to even add even more UDFAs if they need to. So the tough part about picking UDFAs is that most of the guys that I think are good, I think are draftable. And then if they don't get drafted, then I'm like, that's the good UDFA they need to go after, right? So it's hard to kind of project which guys are going to be UDFAs when we have like 250 picks before, right? Like it's just, it's hard for me to pick that guy out. So I can answer the first part of that question, but I don't think I can answer that last part.
No, that's fair. Grandizer asks, have you heard of any legit trade offers down from 6? And like, is there any sort of, what would it take for you to trade down from 6 to 11, say with Tennessee? It's always the one that seems to be mentioned as someone who wants to come up. I kind of think they're in play for 3 personally, but if they can't get there, maybe it's an option for them. I don't know.
I haven't heard of anything specifically, right? I know Brad's surely on the phone, calling people around and looking for it. But my general philosophy is, if you are in the tier, if you are picking in the tier of where there are blue chip players, then you take that blue chip player, right? And if you're going to move out of that blue chip player range, you're asking for a first round pick next year. That's my general rule, right? So if Tennessee is trying to trade up from 11 and you're going to trade back and you believe that is out of the range of the blue chip, you're asking for you're asking for a first rounder. That's my general philosophy on trading back when you're picking in this range. So if there's a blue chip player there, take him. If not, maximize that value.
Makes total sense. Like, most people would think about the distance that you're traveling when it comes to trade value, but It's not. It's how the value of the pick changes, which is how good the draft is and how valuable those players are at those picks. So that makes total sense. Sorry, Ant.
No, so I was about to say, so if there's a certain blue chip running back there at 6, would you really, really upset your colleague and say that they'll take him? Because I know Jeremy would. We'd hear him from over here.
I think the trick is there are certain positions that get put in separate boxes. For example, with me, I have my draft board and then I have my quarterback board. And I think because they're separate in my mind. I can't determine the value between quarterback 5 and like edge 2. You know what I mean? Like it's like edge 2 is going to be higher, but like how much higher? Because quarterback, if you need a quarterback, then you need a quarterback, and that's a completely separate board for me. I don't. It's hard to blend them together, and I do think when you're talking about running back, it's one of those positions where the positional value drives the stock of that player down. While the player may be elite, the value of the position drives the overall grade down. I think it's true with linebacker. I think it's true with running back. And so you may be staring at this elite talent, but if he's at a position that is not as big of a priority, it's going to drive the value of that player down. And that's why I think while Bijan is probably a blue chip player, I don't necessarily think he's a blue chip draft pick.
Big Aries in the Twitch chat says, is there a move in the first round that you don't want to see the Lions make? Which I think is an interesting question that doesn't get asked enough.
Yeah. The thing is with Brad Holmes, he's done so well. He's almost earned the trust that you're like, I don't like it, but I get it. I understand it. Like, for example, if he took Bijan, I would say, man, maybe you're not maximizing your draft capital, but boy, he's a great player and he's fun and I'm happy to have him on the team. You know what I mean? So you could justify adding an extremely talented player, even if you're not and if your only quibbles is with Bijan, it's just going to be maximizing draft capital. So if we're talking about adding a position or in the first round there's a couple of them. Like tight end is a deep class. I don't think you need to use a first rounder on one for the Lions situation and how they value it. I think there's a really good defensive tackle at the top of the class in Jalen Carter. And then I'd probably wait because I don't know if there's another defensive tackle that I would take at 18. Again, in my opinion, I don't know if there's a wide receiver in this class that I would take at 18. I would understand it, but I'm not super high on this wide receiver group. I think there's a lot of talent in that kind of middle, which is really where I think the defensive tackle talent is. And I think where the running back talent is. That kind of sweet spot in between like pick 48 and pick 81. There's some really good offensive skill players. There's some really good defensive linemen. And I think that's kind of where I see the value of those positions. So I think, yeah, so like if they took Kancey at 18, I probably wouldn't be overly excited, but I would understand it, right? If they took, like I said, Bijan, if they took Washington, if they took Darnell Washington, and let's say if they traded back and took him, I mean, that's fine too. Like, I don't love the value at a couple of those spots, and that's where I would kind of push back at those spots.
3 more questions, and then if any of the guys have anything to finish, then cool. But 3 more viewer questions. I've stopped taking any more. I'm sorry, guys, but we're not going to get to them all. Dan Pask had to get one in, despite being at the baseball. Come on, man. Says, which tight end reminds you of Josh Hill in this draft, or is that Brock Wright?
So the thing with Hill was that he was an H-back, right? So like he could do that blocking tight end plus that H-back. And while I don't think it's a perfect comp, I do think a guy like Josh Wiley from Cincinnati is a blocking tight end who has some H-back range, but he's probably more of a tight end. He's got some athleticism, and I think he's got some H-back skills in him. There's a couple other guys like that. I don't like them as much as I like Wiley.
A question about Ed Oliver. Quite a few people asked it. Robo35 on YouTube. Eric, do you think we land him on draft day?
I mean, I'd like it. I've said, I just said it, right? Like after Jalen Carter, I'm not in love with the draft class until the second round. And so I like these guys, a lot of these guys in the second round. But if the going cost for Ed Oliver is a second rounder, which has been floated out there, I'm okay taking that. I would rather have the proven commodity at defensive tackle. And so I would be willing to give up a second rounder for Ed Oliver. I know he has a big contract. I know you're probably gonna have to pay him. That's fine. I like what he is. I like what he can do. I was a big Ed Oliver fan when he was at Houston, right? So like, I'm kind of a sucker for him, and I'd be on board with trying to acquire him.
The Locked On Bills guy from the Draft Network, or former Draft Network guy, thinks that Ed Oliver will get about 13 or 14 mil APY, which I think is maybe a little light compared to what we think he might get. But I can go for that. And
no, as I say, Eric, who do you, out of this draft, who do you not want to see in division? Whether it be a fit with another team. We all have that one guy that we love so much, but who do you not want to see in the division come the end of the draft?
Yeah, I think your top defenders are guys that you want to avoid. You don't want to see Will Anderson. You don't want to see Jalen Carter. You're hoping either you land them or they go somewhere in the AFC. Maybe Seattle will take one of them and you'll have to deal with them, one of them, but that's few and far between when you play Seattle, right? So yeah, those are the two guys I think that just immediately stand out there.
Or a player that you really love who you just don't want to see rocking the green and gold.
It happens inevitably. My favorite back 4 or 5 drafts ago was Aaron Jones. And then he went I had DMs with him. I had set up an interview. He still follows me on Twitter. Absolutely hate that he went to the Packers. Hate it with a passion. So yeah, inevitably a guy that I like will go in within the division. It seems to happen every year.
Jeremy just said Witherspoon to Chicago, which is just all manner of horrible.
This is why people don't like Jeremy all the time.
Right, I've got a fluffy question to finish off the viewer questions, and then if the guys have anything else to finish off, then go ahead. Phil Coop on our WhatsApp group says, Erik Schlitt, you are a bona fide first-round draft pick. You are in the waiting room, you're in the green room on draft day, Thursday night. Do you own an outlandish outfit enough to attend in, and what is it?
Oh, right now? Absolutely not. No.
What would you have?
Absolutely not. Jeez. I don't have anything outlandish anymore. I am an old man, and I have settled into my ways. This t-shirt that I'm wearing, I have, I think, 12 different colors of it, and it's just the same t-shirt, and I wear it every day. It's just wear a different one, just change into a new one. It's ridiculous. I'm so based in comfort and simplicity that I really don't have anything outlandish. If I were to go outlandish, geez.
Jeremy said you're wearing your most outlandish outfit, so
I have shorts on right now. Yeah. Yeah, geez. I don't know if I could pull anything off. I definitely know I couldn't pull it off now. When in my younger days, maybe I would have tried something a little bit fun, like the guys at the draft are. The young guys, they try some fun stuff. But geez, yeah, no. I'm not just a little bit past being stylish. I'm like a decade or two past being stylish. So I have nothing. This is it.
All right, guys, any last questions to finish up?
I've got one that I've just thought of. You're a great, Eric. You're a great football mind. Let's say Dan recognizes that and comes up to you, aside after a press conference, is like, Eric, what is one thing that you think we should change? It can be as macro as we need to run more two running back sets on offense, or it can be as micro as the leverage that cornerbacks use, so they use the sideline as a defender more. What is that one thing you would tell Dan to change?
Yeah, I do think there's mismatch options on offense that I would absolutely love. They don't run the Texas route enough. With Swift, it's lethal. It's almost uncoverable, and they only ran it a couple of times last year. I would love to see more of that. More get my athletes in space and matchups, like, because there's not a linebacker in the NFL that can really hang with Swift on that route. And it's almost a guaranteed 6 yards, like every time, if not more. So I would be employing the give me some 2 RB sets and run Swift on an ankle and just give me options.
And any last questions?
No, I think I've gone through just about everything.
All right. Eric, anything that you want to talk about with upcoming articles? You referenced one thing that might be coming up article-wise.
Well, we have a few things cooking over at Pride of Detroit. We're closing out our community mock draft. We're going to, I think the first round ends like Tuesday or something like that, and then I'll have a couple more. We asked our contributors to also help us out with the second round, and so I picked a couple of second round picks, and so I'm going to do some write-ups on those guys. So we'll have a couple more profiles on them. We're going to get to a point where we start doing the I think the Lions should draft this player, and then we'll do some profiles. So that's really kind of where we're headed. We still have some mock drafts that we're going to try and pump out to appease the fan base that can't get enough of those mock drafts. And when we get to actual draft coverage, we already have our game plan laid out. We have a big Excel document with all of our ideas and things we want covered, and we typically tend to cover anywhere between 100 to 120 articles that we write during that draft. It's a ton of information, a lot of fun stuff, and so next 2 weeks are going to be busy leading up to that, and then we're just going to just unload on content during, and then the week after the draft, we kind of trickle back and pick up the articles that we didn't cover or didn't have time to cover during the draft itself. So a lot of stuff coming down the pipe. It's just a matter of time at this point. We have articles we want. I would really like to get that offensive line article out. I kind of, showed you guys, explained the tier. I want to get that done. So it's just a matter of, a matter of trying to get time, because, I still have, my daughters have a concert on Wednesday that I get to go to, and they're in this thing together. It's pretty cool. And my wife has her job, which is long hours for her, which is always hard. And so, yeah, it's just time. Time is my enemy this time of year, but we have a really good plan, and we've done, I believe, a really good job of covering the draft in recent years, and we're just going to continue to elevate that more. So look, keep that Pride of Detroit tab bookmarked.
Fantastic. Don't forget to follow Eric at Erik Schlitt on Twitter. I'm sure you've heard that from at Pride of Detroit before. Also, don't forget his Patreon. Go and get his draft board, because that's some great stuff. Our next show is on Monday. live first round mock draft for all of us. So there's going to be 5 or 6 of those all going at once, which is pandemonium, but do go and check that out. College show, and you're going to do one this week?
Yeah, we're doing the one on Wednesday that we're meant to this week. I've got Junie coming on. It's
the Mac show, yeah.
The Mac show that we're doing. Yeah, we're giving love to the Mac this week, so that's going to be fun. So join us on Wednesday for that.
Laura has just messaged on Twitch saying, and his wife made him build a fire pit today too.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Man, you poor guy.
In between the Spotify live show that we did, I was moving bags of mulch and building fire pits and all kinds of fun stuff. So that just it's beautiful outside, and it's time to get the children out and off the technology.
Free agency must have been fun when they made all those signings early. You trying to go about your day with all those different signings going on.
It was because Jeremy was on vacation, and while he did contribute, he was on vacation, and so that made things very fun. He would walk away from the beach and write, which was more than I might have done if I was on vacation. But free agency was intense. I think the only signing I missed outright was the Gardner Johnson one, because I put my phone on the charger and then I went and put my kids to bed, and I'm like all casual, talking to him about, what's going on, what's coming up in the future. We're talking, and then I walk back to the computer and it's like text messages, Slack channel alerts, and like Jeremy's already wrote an article, and I was just like, that was the I gotta catch up quick moment during the free agency period for sure.
Just to finish up, don't forget about our draft show as well. If you're not watching Pride of Detroit's one, we're on for all 3 days with catch-up shows in between, 22 hours live streaming, 31 guests from 31 different teams. It's going to be an insane show, so go and check that out. You know where to find us on the socials, so I won't repeat them now. Eric, thank you so much for hanging with us for so long. Amazing to speak to you again. Guys in the chat, fantastic as always. Looking forward to see you next time on the Royal Alliance UK podcast. But for now, one pride.
One pride.
One pride.
Right. Recording stopped.
There's the recording gone. Can't thank you enough, Eric. You have such respect in the space that you just bring so many people. We've never had so many people live as we've just had.
Nice.
So
nice. That's
really
great.
Appreciative of that.
Of course. Guys, it's easy to talk. It's easy. You make it easy. When you talk, look, I get asked to do a lot of shows, but like I enjoy my conversations with you guys because you know what you're talking about, right? Like you understand more about the game and the team and what the organization is doing than a lot of the podcasts that I go on. And it's just such an easy conversation. I didn't even realize how long we've been on because I felt like we were just like chatting, right? And it's easy and it's awesome. It's a credit to you guys. You do a terrific job.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate that. I've just had someone in the chat say, "Guys, you're still live," and it's like, we know the audio show has finished, but like POD do, the audio show ends, but the show still goes on. We're here chatting. I'll have to edit this now, and it's 1:15 in the morning, so at least it's not a work night though, so it's gonna be okay.
True.
Laura said, "Oh, he can talk," which sounds like a whole nother conversation.
That's fine. When it comes to football, the time goes like you don't even notice it. It's easy, and yes, I could. I tend to ramble. Ramble or just continue. My stream of consciousness tends to just keep me going.
I think you and Nick Baumgartner in a room would be really entertaining because Nick
has
and that same trait.
What's funny is Nick and I have a passion for offensive line. And so when they do the individual drills, offensive line individual drills at training camp, Nick and we flow. It's the only time I leave Jeremy, really. He'll stick on one, and I always attach myself to Nick, and we gam it up and talk about like all the fun stuff. It's a very, very, very fun part because Nick Nick's a good talker, and he knows what he's talking about too. So we have a lot of good fun conversations while trying to watch Frank Ragnow and Aleem McNeil battle it out, which is always a ton of fun.
Yeah, I bet. I can't wait for the next load of camp battles when we've drafted some people. So it's gonna be really good fun. Anyway, I think we're gonna draw this to a close given the time. But thank you again, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Again, thanks for being patient with me and making the time work. I know it's late for you, so I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Worth it. Definitely worth it.
It was, yeah.
Anyway,
Absolutely.
All right, guys,
see
take
you
care.
soon. Cheers, Eric.
All right, take care.
And to the live chat as well, this is us. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on Monday for the first round live mock. But we'll see you soon. Bye.